All right. All right. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Today's webinar will be about donating surplus edible food, and my name is Annalisa Bellis, and I will be hosting together with my colleague, Casey Bartholomew. Casey, if you want to show yourself real quick. But Casey and I work together at Stop Waste on the team helping businesses, institutions, and schools prevent and recover surplus edible food in Alameda County. We'd like to thank you all for being with us here today. We've planned for a 30-minute presentation, and we'll start with some context on the problem of wasted food, followed by an overview of the new rules and statewide requirements, cover common misconceptions when it comes to food donation, then invite a guest to share how they have implemented a donation program and actively manage their surplus. We'll also cover practices for prevention and conclude with the free resources and assistance available to help you take action. We aim to have at least 10 minutes remaining for your questions at the end. Some of you have already submitted specific questions as part of registration, and many of those will be answered throughout today's slides. If you have additional questions that come up as we're going through, please use the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. If we don't have the opportunity to answer your question today, we do plan on following up, and we'll get back to you through the email you used to register for this webinar. If you happen to have any technical difficulties, please feel free to let us know in the chat, and my colleagues will do their best to help you out. Today's webinar is being recorded, and we'll follow up with an email that includes the link to access the recording, as well as the links to the free resources we'll be mentioning throughout the webinar, so there's no need for you to take detailed notes. Before we get into the presentation, we would like to take a moment to see who's in the room with a quick poll. Once the poll window pops up, please select whichever answer is most applicable to you. Are you a business, institution, school or school district, jurisdiction or city, nonprofit, waste hauler, or other? And we're getting there with almost 75% answered. So give a couple more seconds for folks to get their responses in. All right, it looks like we have a good spread from all of these different options, and it looks like we've got representation from our jurisdictions and cities. Thanks for your participation. All right, moving on. To give a quick introduction for those of you who may not be familiar with Stop Waste, we are a countywide public agency representing 14 cities, 2 sanitary districts, and the unincorporated areas of Alameda County, with a mission to send less waste to landfill from Alameda County's homes, schools, and businesses, and use resources more efficiently, like energy and water. We take a holistic approach to waste reduction and resource management to help move our communities towards a more sustainable Alameda County. And getting into our topic today, we wanted to provide some context on the issue of food waste. For over a decade, reducing food waste has been one of the primary upstream priority areas for our agency here in Alameda County, as well as a statewide focus with the passage of Senate Bill 1383. In California, we toss nearly 12 billion pounds of food each year, which makes up about 18% of all the material landfilled in our state. Food and other organic materials in landfills emits 20% of the state's methane emissions, which are a climate superpollutant that is 84 times more potent than carbon dioxide at trapping heat in our atmosphere. While the financial cost of uneaten food is greatest for consumers, food surplus within food industry sectors in 2019 was worth about $250 billion. You might be wondering, where exactly is this wasted food coming from? The reality is that waste occurs at every stage of the food system, and all our collective waste mishaps add up. An organization called ReFed found that the largest contributors to wasted food are households who throw away approximately $1,000 to $1,500 in wasted food every year. This is why we've had a consumer-facing educational campaign running for the last 6 years alongside national campaigns from the NRDC and the EPA. After taking households into account, consumer-facing businesses as a whole make up the second largest locations where food is wasted, naturally, as they are the places where we purchase and consume food. The inevitable surplus generated provides an opportunity to prevent wasted food and donate surplus edible food to those in need. Today, we are focusing on the opportunities within consumer-facing businesses, such as restaurants, grocery stores, and institutions like schools or health facilities. Another consideration that relates to the problem of wasted food is that we are seeing a growing rate of food insecurity statewide as well as in Alameda County. According to data from 2014, 5.4 million Californians are food insecure, meaning they are uncertain of where their next meal will come from. This map from Feeding America provides a more recent snapshot of food insecurity rates by city in Alameda County, where we've seen an increase in food insecurity due to pandemic impacts. 1 in 4 residents in our communities are now seeking food assistance. Many of these residents include our most vulnerable community members, such as children and seniors. To ground this statistic further, consider if there are 100 people tuning into this call today, 1 in 4 would mean that 25 people listening in might be in need of food assistance. In July of 2022, the Alameda County Community Food Bank's Director of Community Engagement and Marketing shared that they are experiencing demand just as high as they have seen it at any point during the pandemic. With this amount of need, it doesn't make sense to not address food waste. To address all of these challenges, the California legislature passed SB 1383 6 years ago, which set a statewide goal to reduce by 75% the amount of organic material going to landfills by 2025, and set a statewide goal for food donation. 20% of edible food across the state that is currently being disposed will be diverted to donation by 2025. This will be accomplished by requiring businesses and institutions to recycle and compost waste, and certain businesses and institutions must donate surplus edible food still suitable for human consumption. Reducing the amount of food waste and organics going to landfill will have the fastest impact on curbing climate change, and recovering surplus food will help alleviate hunger. SB 1383 is being implemented in Alameda County under the Organics Reduction and Recycling Ordinance. Today, we'll be focusing on the food recovery aspects of the law, but we also recommend that you bookmark our previous webinar focused on the rules for recycling and composting. My colleague Hugo will drop a link to it in the chat box. With that, let's address some common, let's get into the overview requirements. Diving right into the new requirements, there are 2 groups of larger businesses and organizations that will need to recover surplus edible food. Requirements are the same for both, only starting at different dates. You can see on the screen which food generating sites fall into each of these groups or tiers. If you fall into one of these categories, you'll need to safely recover surplus edible food and have a written agreement with a food recovery partner who will be able to redistribute donations to places like food pantries and soup kitchens. Note that Tier 1 has already taken effect as of January this year. If you'd like to reference these definitions or any of the information presented today, the URL at the bottom of the slide and pasted in the chat box will take you to our website. Going into further detail, here are the basic requirements for Tier 1 and Tier 2 businesses and institutions. They are required to safely recover or donate surplus edible food, recover the maximum amount of food that would otherwise be disposed of, have a contract or written agreement with a food recovery partner, even if donations occur on an as-needed basis, and keep records related to food donation, as well as any food waste prevention activities and distribution of surpluses directly to staff or individuals. One of the primary food recovery requirements for Tier 1 and Tier 2 generators is to establish written agreements or contracts with a food recovery organization or service. The agreement can include a proposed schedule for donation pickup or drop-off, the types of food each food recovery organization and service will or will not accept, safe food handling and packaging requirements, or arrangements for fee-for-service or in-kind donation. The quantity of food donated in pounds per month may also be part of the agreement or may be in separate monthly records. It's important to note that the requirements do not specify what needs to be in the contract or written agreement. We've created a customizable agreement template that can be used, but some food recovery organizations may already have their own templates that they prefer to use with donors. And we'll be putting a link to that template in the chat. Before we move on, we'd like to get a sense of where you all are at in this process. This poll will be anonymous, so feel free to put your answer in, and my colleague will launch the poll. Thinking about your business or workplace, which step best describes where you're at in the process? It's possible that none of these scenarios applies to you, in which case feel free to mark none of the above. Maybe you're tuning in to learn more, but aren't responsible for implementing these steps, or perhaps you're just joining us to listen in. In any case, we are happy to have you all with us here today. And our question is, where are you at in this process? Is donating food brand new to you? Or do you have some experience and donate on occasion? Do you donate regularly? Do you have a written agreement with a food donation partner and keep records on file? Or none of the above? We'll give a few more seconds for those responses and close the poll, but I wanted to give a quick shout out in this photo to these fine gentlemen rescuing surplus food in partnership with The Crucible, a nonprofit industrial arts school in West Oakland. So just summarizing the poll, again, we've got a spread and it looks like we are in good company because we're all here to learn together. All right, moving on. So commercial edible food generators are now required to have a written agreement with and donate excess edible food to a food recovery organization or service, which could be food banks, food pantries, soup kitchens, nonprofits, faith-based organizations, and so on. In this photo, we have two volunteers, Christina and Margaret, who are packing up individually prepared meals for distribution from the Berkeley Food Network, which serves 900 prepared meals each week, often incorporating recovered food. If you are a business operating in Alameda County, you can find a donation partner through Resource, an online directory that includes a list of food recovery organizations and services located in or serving Alameda County. You can review the list of food recovery organizations by city. On the next slide is a screenshot sample of what the directory looks like, and we'll be dropping a link in the chat. This is just a screenshot of the first few food recovery organizations on the list. We recommend that when looking for a donation partner, you make your best effort to work with an organization located closest to you in order to increase efficiency and better guarantee that your local food recovery partner will be able to pick up from you. If the partner you select is located further away, it could take longer for them to get to you and make storing the donations safely a challenge. Please note that this list is not exhaustive and will continue to be updated. The organizations who have contributed their information to this list have the capacity to field your requests and are actively seeking out additional donations. But it's possible that there are others operating in your area who are not on this list. The URL is listed at the bottom of this slide and is also included in the follow-up email that we'll provide links to after today's call. Getting back to the requirements, let's explain what is considered edible surplus food that would be subject to the requirements. Edible food means food intended for people to eat that is still suitable for consumption. This photo is an example from Chefs to End Hunger, which recovers surplus prepared food for clients of Vesta Food Service. It's likely that these roasted carrots and broccoli were a result of overproduction, but held at the proper temperatures, cooled, repackaged, and stored for donation. Food that is not compliant with the California Retail Food Code, known as CalCode, is not considered edible and would not be fit for human consumption under this law. We'd like to emphasize that Stop Waste and other counties across the state have been working together with our departments of environmental and public health to develop best practices for safe food handling guidelines for donated food. There's a range of procedural standards that they have helped us develop based on CalCode. This slide provides some broad common sense guidance, such as not donating food that has been outside the safe temperature zone or not stored properly. I also want to mention that some food recovery organizations are willing to accept certain items past their best by date, but it is important to be transparent with them. We would also like to clarify that food recovery organizations have the right to decline any donations that they deem unsuitable or that they do not have the capacity to properly handle. So you might consider developing relationships with more than one organization in the case that your primary partner is not able to accept what you are offering to donate. With that, let's address some common misconceptions and scenarios regarding surplus edible food. We also know there's a lot of confusion about date labels. And this first scenario is, I can't donate food that's past date. So some businesses assume that the food is not safe to donate or are unsure if a food recovery partner will accept the food. Ultimately, it's up to the food recovery partner who will make the decision about what foods are acceptable. However, most do accept food that's past its best by date. This is an example of a resource from the Alameda County Community Food Bank that provides guidance for food bank staff and volunteers to determine how long after food past the marked date can be distributed or should be composted. Furthermore, it is a common misconception that date labels always indicate food safety. Manufacturers provide date labeling to help consumers and retailers decide when food is at its peak freshness. Except for infant formula, dates are not an indicator of the product's safety and are not required by federal law. Additionally, there are no uniform or universally accepted descriptions used on food labels for open dating in the United States. As a result, there are a wide variety of phrases used on labels to describe quality dates that allow for different interpretations. Most importantly, businesses and institutions are fully protected under the federal Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Act, as well as the California Good Samaritan Food Donation Act, as long as the food donated is donated in good faith and the business is not intentionally donating spoiled foods. Despite the common belief to date, there has never been a successful case of litigation against a food donor due to liability issues. If you'd like to learn more about date labels, there is a website called stilltasty.com, which utilizes guidance from the USDA to determine if food is still safe to eat and the best methods for storage. Our next scenario is, I don't generate enough food to donate. We found that it's common for businesses to think that they don't generate surplus edible food. However, they may not be fully aware of their generation or what is eligible for donation. Even if this is truly the case, businesses and institutions should consider establishing a relationship with a food recovery partner and having an agreement for unforeseen circumstances. A perfect example of this was at the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, when we all went into lockdown. There was an incredible amount of food waste that occurred because food generators were unprepared for how to locate a partner. COVID is an extreme example, but this could happen again with other circumstances as well. If you're not sure whether what you have to donate is enough, it's best to contact a food recovery partner to find out and document any correspondence. We'll talk about record keeping in just a couple minutes. Our last scenario is, I can't find a food recovery organization that will take our surplus food. A tier 1 or tier 2 donor may need to reach out to several organizations before finding one that will accept and redistribute their surplus food. Some businesses may have to set up contracts with multiple food recovery partners. If a business can document that they have made every attempt to donate with no success, then that business should focus on food waste prevention strategies to reduce the surplus and have this information in writing. I'll also mention that Stop Waste is here to help. We can support you with finding a food recovery partner in Alameda County. The URL that just popped up can be used to request assistance, and we'll come back to this later at the end of the presentation. Let's move on to record keeping and reporting. Just a quick reminder that if you're tuning in today from outside of Alameda County, that your jurisdiction may be monitoring compliance in a different way. In Alameda County, food generators will need to keep records that will be requested by either the Alameda County Department of Environmental Health for sites that have a food permit, or Stop Waste for those sites that do not have a food permit through the county. These two local agencies will be monitoring compliance by requesting the following records: a contract or written agreement with food recovery organizations and services, records that include the types of food each recovery partner will receive or collect, schedules for food donation deliveries or collections, such as twice a week on Wednesdays and Fridays. And finally, the total quantity of food donated in pounds per month. We also want to speak to cases where you truly may not have a whole lot to donate. Perhaps your business has a practice of allowing staff to take home surplus food, or the practices you have in place for preventing surplus are such that very little is left to donate, or the type of surplus you have available for donation is something that's not able to be distributed easily. In cases like these, sites should have a description or record of these activities available. Documentation also applies to cases where multiple attempts have been made to offer donations, but the food generator is unable to find a recovery partner willing to accept those items for whatever reason. There is a record-keeping template available at the URL on the bottom of this slide, and there's also a field to record these practices in the template. In cases where surplus is regularly generated but not able to be donated, a focus on practices to prevent that waste will be key. But before we discuss prevention, and because I've been talking for quite a bit, I'd like to invite some guest speakers from a local business to share their perspective on how they've incorporated surplus food donation and other prevention practices into their daily operations. Please welcome Neil Purohit, Inventory Control Manager with Good Eggs, a grocery delivery service that aims to source products locally and deliver radically fresh food.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Annalisa. That was really informative. As Annalisa mentioned, my name is Neil Purohit. I'm one of the operations managers, specifically with respect to inventory control. So I want to start with a little blurb about like Good Eggs' mission. So radical freshness, impeccable quality, curated selections, and exceptional service. Picked yesterday, baked this morning by people we know and trust. We go straight to the source and bring only the best right to you. We're Good Eggs. So with that said, I kind of want to tie it down to like how we started thinking about waste earlier this year and the journey that our organization has gone on since. So, you know, as a company that warehouses groceries, obviously our goal is to not generate any food waste, but that's not very realistic. Obviously, we can't project every single order that comes in every day. So for the longest time, what we did is we kind of had an ad hoc donation, like a list of partners who would come in kind of unscheduled and, you know, like take what they could, give it out to the community. We're in West Oakland, which, you know, is an underserved community and could really use the help. But then earlier this year, I had the opportunity to meet with Annalisa and some of her colleagues, and they talked about the importance of SB 1383, talked about how, you know, businesses that generate food waste are going to be responsible for it. And, you know, when like that mission statement that I just read, it got me thinking that, you know, not only do we have an obligation to bring this radically fresh, high quality product to our customers, but being in the middle of West Oakland, like we almost have a responsibility to give back to the community that we're in. So that resonated like really powerfully with me. And I also live in West Oakland, so I see firsthand like how much the community could use that, food assistance. So from there, we kind of started building out like two pillars of our food waste management program. The first one kind of touches on building programs with donation partners. So I want to shout out Common Vision. We've partnered really closely with them to 3 days a week feed 600 families at three West Oakland elementary schools. So we just started this like 2 weeks ago. Still ironing out the kinks. Like any new program, we're still figuring out where we have opportunity and where we're succeeding and where we may need to make some improvements. But no, like I've visited one of these schools, I've handed out food to the kids. I can see their faces light up, like seeing food that they may not otherwise have access to. And I think it's part of any for-profit organization to be sustainable, to be held accountable by the community that you operate in. So this is something that's supported from the executive level at Good Eggs all the way down to the associate level. And I'm really thankful that I get to be in charge of this program. So yeah, we really want to encourage other partners to act the way that Common Vision has acted in terms of like transparency, inviting us to their events, being super clear on like where exactly the food is going, and the impact that it's having. And, mainly that it's local. That's also very important to us. So we want our other donation partners who kind of come in on a more ad hoc basis to follow that type of model. So that way, towards the end of this year or like as soon as possible, honestly, we can start checking those requirements off, right? In terms of how much exactly we're recovering to which organization, and those type of things. And the other pillar of our waste management program is pretty cool. So we about half of our customers' basket contains produce, which, I don't know if anyone here has ever purchased organic produce, but sometimes you get corn that lasts for 4 days. Sometimes you get corn that you can't even sell the next day. It's just the nature of like buying pesticide-free and GMO-free produce. So, obviously being the inventory control manager, I work closely with purchasing to look at inventory turns and make sure that we're not overbuying and that, instead of buying one big drop, we'd buy like 3 smaller drops that we can sell through and provide that product at like peak quality. But sometimes you just don't win and stuff comes in and you can't really sell it. So we found a really cool way to partner with this farm in Petaluma. It's called Preserve Farm Kitchen. So they have like jam recipes that they sent to us, and they're like, hey, once you get 400 pounds of peaches and 50 pounds of ginger, send it over to us. We'll make jam, send it back. So this has turned into like a company-wide, like a membership thing, and we're like using it as like a holiday gifting project as well. So it's called Good Eggs Fruit Rescue. So if any of you go to the Good Eggs website, you can shop this jam starting tonight. And what's really cool about it is it's product from our farmers that we sent to our kitchen. So we have a kitchen that makes value added like meals and like, cuts watermelon into like pieces. So value added produce basically and prepared meals. So we sent all this fruit over to the kitchen. They cured it with lemon juice, packed it into certain bags. We coordinated like shipping it up to Petaluma, and we just got our jam like a couple weeks ago. So we're looking to upcycle more of our product in a fashion like that, where we can, that fruit may have gone to donation organizations, or maybe it wouldn't have gotten picked up in time and we would have just had to compost it. And that's like a double whammy, because obviously, that's not great for the environment when we're adding to like landfills, but also it's just a huge waste of food, and that's a shame. So another thing that we're working on is there's a local farm called Wow Farm. So we're trying to partner with them to get some of our excess compost over there. And then the next kind of creative upcycling project in our pipeline is So we're taking a lot of our greens that we, similar situation as the plums and the peaches where they're not quite at peak quality and we can't quite sell them. So we're getting a pulverizer and a dehydrator, and we're going to crush it into powder and then have like juice blends or like superfood blends for customers. So I'm working with our director of partnerships on, finding someone to help us out there. But yeah, those are the two main ways right now in which Good Eggs is trying to reduce our waste, is by partnering with people who can bring it to the local community and figuring out creative ways to throw away less produce.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Neil. I really appreciate that you shared, your perspective in the business, not only, why it's valuable to Good Eggs, but also the value it gives to you as a human being, and also seeing that reflected out in the community. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing, and super cool, like all those initiatives that you all are diving into.
Thank you. And thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Awesome. So yeah, thank you, Neil. And he's going to stay on until the end of the call. And if you have any questions for Neil or Good Eggs, feel free to type them in the Q&A box so that he can respond while we continue with the presentation. All right. So Neil actually provided a great segue to our primary recommendation for complying with this new law: reduce surplus to begin with. The Environmental Protection Agency created this helpful graphic for understanding the hierarchy of addressing food waste, from the most preferred strategies at the top to the least preferred waste reduction strategies at the bottom. The greatest environmental and social benefits come with preventing food from being wasted in the first place. Given the complexity of storing, transporting, preparing, and distributing surplus food to recovery organizations and then to people, we strongly recommend revisiting your practices for preventing wasted food in the first place, in the hopes that you will be able to minimize the effort and time commitment it takes to manage waste after it is created. For businesses, this can mean ensuring that all food purchased is consumed through strategies such as menu planning based on what you have on hand, practicing better food safety protocols to avoid the need for disposal, and constantly evaluating surplus and inventory. If, after maximizing food waste prevention, businesses still have surplus food, it's important to donate edible food for redistribution to feed people. And finally, inedible parts or food that cannot be eaten should be recycled through animal feed, composting, or anaerobic digestion. The landfill is no longer appropriate for disposing of food and organic waste. There are many strategies that food facilities can incorporate into their daily operations to reduce food waste while helping to save money. These might include revisiting your systems for monitoring inventory of food and storage, delegating staff to be point persons or people for collecting food that is close to end of life, or investing in new tools, technology, or apps that can create new opportunities to manage surplus. There are many more technology solutions out there than ever before, ranging from inventory management software to technology that helps keep produce at peak freshness for longer, or even selling items at a discount to consumers. Stop Waste will be compiling a list of food waste prevention service providers that will be available on our website by early 2023. In addition, those approved providers will be eligible to propose projects in partnership with businesses in Alameda County and apply for grant funding that will be awarded in spring 2023. I'd like to invite you to take a moment now to consider your current practices for preventing wasted food. How do you already take steps to reduce waste? What practices could you further refine or focus in on? And finally, what steps will you begin with after you log off today? We're getting towards the end, but just a couple more slides. But to close out the topic of prevention, I'd like to highlight a best practice from another local business operating in Emeryville in Oakland, who was a recipient of one of our Business Efficiency Awards for excellence in food waste prevention earlier this year. Just Fair is a catering company that worked with Stop Waste to implement a food waste tracking system called LeanPath. By using the technology and staying on top of managing their overproduction, They saved approximately 4.5 tons of food from becoming waste over the course of 2 years and achieved a 96% reduction from baseline. What really helped them achieve this was ensuring that food waste prevention was a celebratory affair rather than penalizing staff for revealing opportunities to cut down on waste. This is Jorge, who had been dubbed the Lean Path Champion for the week. Just a reminder that workplace culture can also be a contributing factor to how waste is handled. And now we're going to be closing out our presentation portion with some resources. Stop Waste provides free technical assistance to businesses operating within Alameda County that call our hotline or sign up online for technical assistance. Through that TA, we can provide help with setting up a food donation program, locating a recovery partner that best meets your needs, assistance with written agreements or record keeping, best practices for food waste prevention, or support with general waste assessments such as help with organics and recycling, service level, or free indoor bins. And lastly, grant funding. I mentioned it earlier, but just to say again, our annual grant cycle will be accepting applications in January 2023. We have a focus area for food waste prevention and recovery projects that is available for businesses and nonprofits, providing up to $20,000 in funding for each request. And on our webpage for the food recovery rules of the county ordinance, you'll find the following resources, which we've touched on. Many of them we've touched on today. A copy of the food recovery notice that was sent out to all Tier 1 and Tier 2 sites that are covered in the law in January of this year. So you can check that and see if you recall getting a letter like that earlier this year. There's a customizable food recovery agreement or contract, a template for record keeping, as well as food donation guides for both businesses and schools. Lastly, there are several landing pages on our website that provide the information and support tools mentioned today. All the links have already been dropped in the chat box, but we'll also be sending these up in a follow-up email to registrants. Now we are moving into our Q&A portion. So that concludes our presentation, and we've got about 20 minutes-ish for your questions. We have received a lot of questions submitted as part of registration, and we've got some in the chat. So I'm going to welcome Casey Bartholomew, who will be taking the lead on your questions today.
Thank you, Annalisa. It does look like we have a number of questions in the Q&A, and we did receive a few questions that were sent in with registration. So let's address those first before we move into the Q&A and chat. And again, if you have any other questions, please use the Q&A for those. I also just wanted to mention that we do have Rachel Balsley, who's a senior program manager at Stop Waste. She leads our SB 1383 and ORO work, and she is also on the call, available to answer any general questions or more downstream questions around recycling and composting requirements. So the first question that we have is about how to connect food pickups or food recovery partners with the hotel industry. And this comes from someone who represents over 40 hotels looking for ways to give back to the community. As Annalisa mentioned, hotels and other food generators in Alameda County can visit Stop Waste list of food recovery organizations and services on our website. And I know the link is available in the chat to find local donation partners that are able to accept the types of food that hotels generate. I would assume that most of those donations would be more prepared food or maybe some whole ingredients. And there are a number of food recovery organizations on our list that are able to collect and or distribute prepared food, but it is a more challenging item for our food recovery organizations to recover. So please check that list. You'll see the types of food that each organization accepts. And then in addition, there are some food recovery services operating in our county that will pick up or recover food from multiple sites. Often those services do charge a fee, but they do bring that donated food to other food recovery organizations in the community that will ultimately redistribute that food to their clients and food insecure communities. And then lastly, on this one, I just wanted to mention that we do have at the Alameda County Food Recovery Network, which is a forum that can potentially match donors with food recovery partners. We have a monthly meeting at the end of each month. And so if you're interested in getting information out to our network, please reach out to us. We're hoping to build in some opportunities for business donors to join those meetings for more collaboration. All right, so our next question is looking for confirmation that exemptions still need to be filed with the county or city and hauler. I am assuming this is referring to the downstream requirements for composting and recycling collection service. So I'll just add that the Organics Reduction and Recycling Ordinance requires that all Alameda County accounts, business accounts, subscribe to compost and recycling collection service unless they have an approved waiver or an approved alternative service. So something like backhauling or self-haul, shared service, or third-party service provider. And also, in addition, there are no exemptions for the edible food recovery requirements for Tier 1 and Tier 2 generators. So any requests for collection service exemptions and waivers for Alameda County businesses should be submitted to Stop Waste through a link on our website, stopwaste.org/rules waivers, and hopefully someone can throw that in the chat. Sites with an approved waiver will not be required to subscribe to recycling and compost service for a 5-year period. And I also wanted to mention, we do have a webinar that was focused on the composting and recycling service requirements from March, and there's a more detailed explanation of exemptions and waivers in that webinar. So those were the two that we received through registration. I have answered a number of questions in the Q&A, so I'm just going to go back to those that have been answered and share out with the group, because I think some of these are really interesting and may be helpful. So the first question is from the Q&A is, what if donating edible food requires using other resources like aluminum and plastic? A restaurant might have to use aluminum pans or foil or plastic containers or wrap, and there might be some ecological impacts of using those disposable materials to donate food. And yes, this is definitely a challenge when it comes to donating prepared food in particular. Stop Waste is working on establishing alternatives to single-use disposable foodware and related packaging. And we have several pilots and programs in place addressing reducing these SUDs. So, you know, another encouraging aspect of establishing an agreement with your food recovery partner is that you may be able to work with your partner to establish a reusable container return system for donation, especially if they are regularly picking up or receiving food from your establishment. So that's a consideration. And in addition, as Annalisa highlighted, Stop Waste has a number of resources, including technical assistance and grants, to potentially help with transitioning from single-use disposables to reusables. And I can put a link in the chat to more information on those. All right. So the next question and or comment is from an executive chef at a tech-based company. that fits into potentially tier 2. And they shared that their establishment is minimizing food waste by repurposing food into grab and go offerings and salad bar options, any and all prepared food that has not previously been served to our customers. And they're also looking at installing a food digester to take care of the remaining waste. Are they required to establish a contract in this situation? So first, I just want to congratulate you on those food waste prevention and reuse practices. Those are definitely wonderful practices to minimize the generation of surplus edible food through prevention. In order to comply with the law, I would definitely encourage you to keep records on site of these prevention activities if you are inspected by the Department of Environmental Health, so you can demonstrate these measures that you're taking to minimize surplus. And, you know, as Annalisa mentioned, it's always good to have a donation partner in mind so that you can address those circumstances or situations that are out of your control, to have as a backup plan. But if you're generating absolutely no surplus and you're composting your surplus that's inedible, then you would be in compliance as long as you have that documentation of those best practices. The next question was about getting copies of a document. I believe it was referring to the date guidance tool from our Alameda County Department of Environmental Health. I do know that they are updating that guide, but I did want to mention that we will be sharing a copy of today's PowerPoint as well as a recording of the webinar, and all of the resources that we shared will be available. We'll follow up with some additional links. There is also a question around food safety. So I will take a pass at answering this, but I also want to share a disclaimer that anything related to food safety or safe food handling should always be in guidance with the Alameda County Department of Environmental Health. And I know we have some inspectors on the call today. But based on recommendations that we have received previously from our County Department of Environmental Health, generally food is up until donation pickup or drop off, hot foods must be held at 135 degrees Fahrenheit or above, cold foods at 41 degrees Fahrenheit or below, and frozen foods at 0 degrees Fahrenheit. Any donated food that is kept out of this safe temperature range for more than 30 minutes may not be safe to donate or consume. As I mentioned, always check with the County Department of Environmental Health for more guidance. I think the additional question on this one was how many days is food safe? And generally what we have read and heard is depending on the food type, so it varies, between 4 to 7 days past preparation. So it's always crucial and important to date label your food in terms of when it was prepared, so that you can have a timestamp of how long that food has been prepared and packaged. But again, always check with your environmental health department. I know that they have even helped some businesses set up standard operating procedures for safe food handling for donated food. So I encourage you to reach out to them. And we also have additional guidance in our food donation guide. Annalisa, I thought I saw one here for you. Let me answer one more. And this is a question about, does Stop Waste encourage businesses to collaborate with Too Good to Go? And yes, Too Good to Go is a great example of one of the many apps and resources that are out there and available to businesses to both generate additional revenue while also reducing surplus edible food by selling it at a discounted price. And so we, as Annalisa mentioned, we are in the process of collecting a list of food waste prevention solution providers like Too Good To Go, but there may be others, and getting the word out to businesses throughout the county so that you can access those types of services. Did you want to add anything else to that, Annalisa?
I'll just give a moment. Actually, I don't know if Neil wants to chime in on this, but there might be we know of lots of businesses that are using Too Good To Go, actually. So it's definitely worth looking into.
Yeah, I'll jump in. So I think to go back to what I was talking about earlier, it's not like we're going to make some significant profit with Too Good To Go. I think the aim is to more like reduce the amount of waste we're generating overall. One thing Good Eggs was partnered with Too Good To Go for a cool like 6 months, and we recovered a lot of waste, fed a lot of people together. I think like one point of consideration is like if we want to make a strong impact in the community and set aside food for these elementary school children, like does selling a piece of salmon at a third of its retail value, like would we rather make like that money, or would we rather like feed a kid who like we can hand out the food directly to? So it kind of just brings up like good questions. I don't know what the right or wrong answer is there, but I do know while we were like seeing a lot of traction and like Too Good To Go was scaling like to the point where we were doing like 40 to 50 like bags per day, we noticed that we had less to give out to our community. So it is something to self-reflect upon, to say, hey, if you have this excess food, like what is the best thing to do with it? And I don't think there's one correct answer there. I think that's part of the reason why we're all here today, is to think about difficult questions like that.
Thanks so much, Neil.
So I'm going to move on to some of the questions that haven't been answered, since I think you can all see the responses to questions that have been answered. There is a question about a guide for out-of-date foods. Again, we'll follow up with any links to or resources that we've shared today. The next question is there a list of ideas for ways restaurants and businesses can implement those reduction practices? We do have a number of new guidance tools that are being developed with a number of counties across the state and their environmental health or public health departments. These will be one-pagers for different types of food generators. So we have one specific to healthcare and hospitals, one for restaurants, one for schools, and we hope to have those available soon, like within weeks on our website. We're just trying to work out a QR code that you can scan to get additional resources on those. We do have some information available on our website as well, but definitely stay tuned for our new one-pagers for different types of food generators, and those will be posted on our website. And I believe, another question in the Q&A is about resources for businesses to find organizations that accept food for animal feed. I am not aware of any resources that we currently have on our website. With the law, the requirement is for any edible surplus food to be donated to food recovery organizations, and any inedible food waste to be composted, or obviously using prevention. So currently we're not promoting food to feed, but there certainly are businesses that do accept food byproducts to go into animal feed, like dog food and other other animal feed like that. That's all I'm seeing, Annalisa. Are you seeing anything else in the chat?
I think that's, oops, some of them are disappearing into the answers section, so that's why it's hard to keep track. Let me review again. We may have, did we already address the how long some prepared and cooked foods can be held at the right temperature, being good to donate? We did,
Yes.
okay. Yeah, I think, oh, last one. Does the Alameda County Community Food Bank accept prepared food from restaurants versus prepackaged foods, like, or shelf stable foods? They probably mean for like cans and so on.
And I do see a response here, but generally and currently the county food bank does not accept prepared food from restaurants, but they do work with a number of their member agencies or other food recovery organizations that might. So again, I encourage you to look at the list of food recovery organizations and services on our website. We are constantly updating that list. So what you see today may look different tomorrow. We're adding organizations and they are updating their information in terms of acceptable food types that they collect for donation.
We did get one more question, just kind of address it. I mean, you touched on it earlier, Casey, but just the waste generated by the containers that are used to donate food. And I did provide another response in writing to the first question that kind of touched on it, just to consider that, if we think about food and thinking about the whole process of the food cycle and how that food had to get to, being stored and transported and held at the right temperature and cooked and prepared, and every person that food, the hands that touch that food and then it going to waste. I think that, and also the social benefits that we've talked about today and the environmental costs. I think those are just definitely some things to consider in terms of, considering the waste generated by single-use containers.
I see another question related to the information sheets that have been provided. Are they available in Spanish or other languages in order to help train staff? That's a great question. That's definitely something that we are working on. We do have a few documents that are translated, and our website itself, this is a new feature, but at the bottom right corner of our website, any information on our web pages can be translated. Using the feature on the bottom right, there's a flag that you can click on to select the language. But as we do more outreach and technical assistance, we will be developing more resources in other languages, and many of our jurisdictions are also doing that as well. Well, I think we're almost at time, Annalisa, so I'll hand it back over to you to close this out.
Great. Yeah, and I did just put back on the slides our contact information. So if anyone has another question and you want to reach out to either of us directly to answer, here's our contact info. And yeah, I just want to thank you all for joining us today, and look out for the follow-up email that will include a link to this recording so you can watch it again, as well as the links to all of the resources that we talked about today. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.